My name is Robert Hale. I'm 72 years old, and this is the story of how I finally stopped being the quiet man in my own house. My mother, Margaret Hale, is 84. She raised me by herself after my father passed away when I was 10. She worked as a school cook during the day and took in sewing at night. She never once let me feel poor or fatherless. Even after I married Linda and started my own family, she stayed in the background, always kind, never demanding. Linda and I have been married for 41 years. We have a son and a daughter, both grown and living in other states. Our house in Ohio is paid off, and we have enough money to live without worry. On paper, everything looked fine. But inside the walls of that house, things had slowly turned cold. It began when my mother called one evening in March. The doctor had told her she shouldn't be alone anymore because of her balance and recent falls. Without thinking twice, I invited her to stay with us for a few weeks. Linda was in the kitchen when I told her. 2 weeks, she asked, not looking up from the dishes. Maybe 3, I said. She's not doing well. Linda dried her hands and gave me that look I had learned to recognize over the years, the one that meant she was already calculating how much this would inconvenience her. Fine, she said. But she's staying in the den. The guest room is for when my sister visits. I should have argued. My mother was 84. She had raised me with nothing and still managed to give me everything. But I stayed quiet. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself peace was more important than pride. My mother arrived 2 days later. She walked slowly with a cane, carrying a small overnight bag. I helped her to the den and made up the old pull-out couch with clean sheets and an extra pillow. She smiled and thanked me, the same way she had thanked me for every small thing since I was a child. That first night passed without incident. But the second morning, everything changed. I came downstairs and found my mother standing in the hallway, still in her nightdress, looking unsure. Linda was standing in the doorway of the guest room. I told your mother the guest room is needed this weekend, Linda said. My sister might come. She can sleep on the floor if she has to. There are blankets in the closet. My mother looked at me with gentle eyes. It's okay, Robert. I've slept on floors before. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I just stood there while my wife decided where my 84-year-old mother would sleep. That night, I watched my mother slowly lower herself onto an old air mattress on the den floor. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for anything else. She simply folded her hands and closed her eyes. For the next 12 days, this was how she lived. Every morning I helped her up. Every night I watched her struggle back down. Linda never offered the guest room. She never asked how my mother was feeling. She simply carried on as if this arrangement made perfect sense. I stayed silent. After my mother went home, I didn't confront Linda. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even mention what had happened. Instead, I began to notice things I had ignored for years, how Linda spoke about my mother on the phone, how she rolled her eyes when my mother called, how she had gradually removed every trace of my mother from our home. One evening, 3 weeks later, I made a decision. I called my longtime attorney, Mr. Samuel Whitaker. We met in his office the following Monday. I didn't go into dramatic explanations. I simply told him what I wanted. I need to make sure my mother is protected, I said. And I need it done quietly. Over the next 7 weeks, we made several changes. I transferred the deed of our house into a living trust with my mother as the sole trustee. I moved the majority of our investments into accounts only I could access. I left the everyday joint accounts exactly as they were so Linda wouldn't notice anything unusual. I never told her what I was doing. 2 months later, my mother had another fall. The doctor said she needed someone with her at all times. I didn't ask Linda for permission. I simply told her my mother was moving in permanently. She laughed at first. "You can't be serious," she said. I am, I replied. And this time she's not sleeping on the floor. When my mother arrived, I carried her bag straight to the master bedroom. I had already moved my own clothes into the guest room. My mother tried to protest, but I wouldn't allow it. This is your room now, I told her. Linda found out when she came home from the store. She stood in the bedroom doorway, staring at my mother's suitcase on the bed. What is this? She demanded. I looked at her and answered calmly, my mother is staying in the room she should have had from the beginning. 3 days later, Linda received a letter from my lawyer. The house was no longer in our names. It belonged to the Margaret Hale Living Trust. She had 30 days to decide whether she wanted to live under the new rules or leave. She chose to leave. The argument happened in the kitchen. She threw the letter on the table and shouted for nearly an hour. I never raised my voice. You stayed silent when she told my mother to sleep on the floor, I finally said. You stayed silent every single time she was treated like she didn't matter. So I stayed silent too, until I could do something that actually protected her. She tried to fight it. She called our children. She threatened divorce. But the trust was legal and unbreakable. Our children, after learning the full story, chose not to get involved. 6 months later, I sold the house. My mother and I moved into a smaller, single-story home near a lake. It had wide doorways, a garden she could enjoy, and a bedroom with morning sunlight. For the first time in decades, our home felt peaceful. My mother lived another 18 months. She passed away at 86 in the bed I had given her, surrounded by warmth and dignity. In her final weeks, she never once had to sleep on the floor. Before she died, she held my hand and said, "You didn't have to give up so much for me, Robert." I smiled and replied, "Yes, I did. I should have done it the first night you arrived." Some people believe that staying silent keeps the peace. I used to believe that too. But I've learned that silence can also protect cruelty. I stayed silent for too long. When I finally broke that silence, I made sure my mother never had to sleep on the floor again. And I never will either.